have just a few announcements here before we get started. Thank you for coming out to the Wood County Museum. Believe it or not, this is our 20th Living History Day. This is our 20th. Okay, and now for all the rules. Don't stand up, block anybody's picture taking. If you have cell phones, please turn off the ringer. You're welcome to take photos of the presenters if you would like. Restrooms are in the main building here right behind me. You can go up the front steps into the porch, or I believe we have the door open here at the ramp. So either way, get you into the bathrooms, okay? Let me see. Our gift shop is open as well. And we have a new book out that was written by our curator, Holly Kirkendall. And it is about the history of all the infirmaries in the state of Ohio. She did a lot of research. It partners with the exhibit that we have at the museum for comfort and convenience. And it was just released in June. So that is available in our gift shop. We have our museum information tent with events and also free bottled water. If anybody wants a bottle of water, raise your hands over at the tent, over there in the pop-up. Hopefully they don't get blown away over there. And also we have one more music at the museum. If you want to come to the museum on the evening of Thursday, September 14th, we have a concert on the East Wing porch. It's really lovely. The band sits up on the porch and people bring their chairs, and usually we have about 3 food trucks. It's a really nice time. We have beer and wine and seltzers that we sell out of the front of the lunatic asylum, so you can get your beer and have a good time. And that's going to be Thursday, September 14th, 6 p.m. There's also games and stuff available for children outside while that's going on. And we do have 50/50 tickets available. They look like this. We are drawing this 50/50 at the September 14th concert. That is the last free music at the museum for this year, for the summer. We would like to thank our sponsors for the 20th Living History Day. So DACOR Internet Services, Portage Center Arbor, number 524, Gleaners, North Baltimore Arbor, number 461, Gleaners, Wood County Genealogical Society, DBD Sound Reinforcement, and of course the Wood County Historical Society. We would like to thank the members of the Living History Committee, Millie Brokaw, Keith and Wendy Guyon, Dick Martin, Holly Kirkendall, and Marissa Muniz Kohoff. And we would also like to thank this year's presenters. One of them is unfortunately ill. I believe she has strep throat, so she is recovering at home and won't be able to join us. That's Rose Drain. But we also have Dale David. Raise your hand. Wendy Guyon, Lane Hackle, Anderson Lee, Kyle Miller, Reverend Jeff Schooley, and Steve Speck. All right, thank you very much. I'll give you just a few points about how this Living History event got started. And then we'll see if we have any relatives here from the people that are being portrayed today. So the first Living History Day was held August 29th of 2004. It was over in the atrium of the Wood County Library for the first year. And every year after, it was at Oak Grove Cemetery, up until 2019, when it was moved to the grounds of the Wood County Museum in order to celebrate the inhabitants of our pauper cemetery in conjunction with our 4-time award-winning exhibit for comfort and convenience. The idea of memorializing former citizens of Wood County in the form of first-person storytelling is credited to Lolita Guthrie, a former member of the Wood County Geological Society and a member of the Bowling Green Sesquicentennial Committee. So I know many of you have your programs, but I'll just read through the names really quick. If you are related to any of the people we're talking about today for celebrating the Wood County Fair's 150th anniversary, then please raise your hands or give a shout. So Ethel Keep Berlin was going to be portrayed by Rose Drain, but again, she is ill and cannot participate today. But anybody related to Ethel? Oh, we do have some. Oh, very good, very good. John Lawrence Clarke. Wonderful, wonderful. Claude Frederick Haskins. Colster Haskins. Daryl Henches. Oh, wow. Oh, he's got a whole group over here. Wonderful. And over here. Ah, good, good. Julianna Lowmaster Hott. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Anyone? Oh, we got one. Very good. Andrew Manville. And James Ordway. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all again for coming out to the museum on this lovely day in August. And I will turn it over to Keith Guyon. Are you first up?
I'm first up.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Welcome. Is this on? Okay, there it is. Welcome to the 2023 Living History Program. This year we celebrate the 150th Wood County Fair. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the 150th anniversary of the Wood County Fair. The first fair was in 1851, which, if I do my math correctly, was 172 years ago. So there were gaps in the time when there were no fairs, but this year was the 150th fair that happened just earlier this month. All of the people we're celebrating today had some connection with the fair at some time in Wood County's history. We will hear their stories and their contributions to the fair in their day, as well as the lives that they were living while they were here in Wood County. The first county fair was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts in 1807. It was organized by Elkanah Watson, a sheep farmer. He wanted to show sheep and encourage good farming practices. The first fair consisted of sheep shearing, but it got better. More events were added over the years, and the fair started to spread through New England and into the Midwest. And our first fair here was in 1851. Our first honoree today is Hollister Haskins.
Isn't it a beautiful day, and I'm so happy to be able to share my story with you. I've had quite a journey. It began in 1799 when I was born in Massachusetts, but my family moved to the Maumee River in 1817. They taught me to develop habits of virtue, morality, industry, and economy. My mother, a woman of many virtues, was a cousin to President Franklin Pierce. So another Wood County connection to the presidents. When I was 18 years old in the year 1818, I married Fanny Gunn in Waterville. Fanny's parents, Sarah and Martin Gunn, were among the first settlers in this part of northwest Ohio. We built a house on the Granger's Island on the Maumee River next to Waterville, and we lived there for about 3 years. On May 4th, 1820, at just 21 years old, I was named to the first grand jury of Wood County among 13 other men. I guess that's one of the perks when you're one of the first settlers of an area. You get called on to do those sorts of things. In 1824, I acquired government land in what became Liberty Township. I had a lot of help building my cabin. Several friends from Waterville came, as did some of the natives who lived nearby. My cabin was built of logs and stood near the bank of a creek. That creek you may know as the Portage River, not far from where General Hull had his stockade during the War of 1812. Because of that cabin that I called home, I came to be called the father of, not Haskins, Portage. I enjoyed living in my home on the wilderness, but it could be lonely at times. During the early years, our home in Liberty Township, our closest neighbor was 12 miles north in Miltonville, and our next closest was 22 miles to the south. Since buildings were few and far between, Fanny and I had 10 children, 6 of whom lived to adulthood. There was no local school building. So our cabin served as schoolhouse where the students received instructions from various different citizens. Also, it's believed that the first sermon to be preached in Liberty Township was at our cabin by the Reverend Strong, a United Brethren minister. I began trading with the local natives and prospered enough to allow me to build a bigger trading house and tavern where I sold a variety of dry goods and groceries to the neighbors and traded with the natives for furs. In January 1829, a mail route was developed between Findlay and Perrysburg, and the post office was built in my town, but it was referred to as Haskins Place. I was the postmaster there for 18 years. In 1833, I built a cabin for Mr. English, my hired man, and between the cabin and mine, his cabin and mine, we were kind of the center for hospitality for travelers and neighbors. In 1835, the English home was used as a schoolhouse for 36 children, with William North serving as the first teacher. In 1836, I laid out the village of Portage. I hired Neptune Nearing, Neptune Nearing, to survey the east half of Portage into lots, and I built a house there where I lived out my days until my death in 1872. During the years of 1837 and 38, we were plagued by a band of burglars, counterfeiters, and horse thieves operating in Wood County and made Liberty Township their headquarters. They covered an area that included Huron County to the east, Sandusky, Wood, Henry, and Williams counties, and extended west into Indiana. They became so bold and lawless that the citizens of Wood County decided enough was enough, and I, along with many others, pledged to clean out the gang. Eventually, 12 of them were arrested and brought to trial. The trial was in session for 15 days and they were convicted. By 1844, all the counties were free from those bandits. In addition to being a business owner and postmaster, I made money in other ways too. For example, in 1854, I was paid the hefty sum of $19.82 for logs I delivered to the Perrysburg and Findlay Plank Road Company. We did well enough that in 1856, Fanny and I deeded 2 lots of land in Portage to the trustees of the Methodist Church. The Wood County Agricultural Society was formed in 1851, and I was one of the signers of the Constitution in 1854. I was named vice president and was active in promoting the early Wood County fairs. What a great way to meet your neighbors and show off your animals and other products of your endeavors. You may have heard that the first Wood County Fair was held in Bowling Green on October 15th and 16th in 1851. During the years leading up to the Civil War, Fanny and I and our children arranged for our house to become a stop in the Underground Railroad. We would occasionally help escaped slaves make their way from the South to Canada. There were several homes along the way in Bowling Green and Perrysburg that provided a safe place for them. I haven't told you much about my family. As I said, we had 10 children, 4 of whom died in infancy, which was very hard. 6 grew to adulthood, and Fanny and I are very proud of them and their accomplishment. Sarah was perhaps the first white child born in Liberty Township. She married Joseph Clarke, and they moved to Missouri. Delia never married. Wealthy, yes, wealthy, married a farmer by the name of John DeWitt. Henry built a mercantile building in Portage and eventually moved to Indiana. Carissa married Isaac Van Gordner, and they stayed in Portage. And Cynthia married Jesse Roller, who became a druggist and businessman in Toledo. I have certainly lived a full and rewarding life, and I thank you for the opportunity to share some of that with you. And please, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Haskins. We know that Mr. Haskins was heavily involved in the earliest of the Wood County fairs. The 1851 fair was held on a hill just outside the town limits of Bowling Green. Now, you may think that there are no hills in Bowling Green. You would be wrong. It is not a pancake flat town. It is an almost pancake flat town. But there are a few bulges and bumps here and there that can qualify as hills, and the first county fair was held on one. You don't believe me? Well, the hill where the fair was located is still there. It's on the west side of North Church Street, across the street from the library. You know the Carter House? It sits on top of that hill. And there is that stretch of Court Street that is paved with the bricks that we've been using to drive across town while the construction was going on Worcester Street. That is also on the hill. So the hill is still there, and you can still find it. Once you look for it, you can see that it's there. Now, the fair extended north and west from that hill out into the countryside. This was before the Carter House was built, and it was before they were building railroads that connected Bowling Green to Tontogany. The first fair was organized by the Wood County Agricultural Society. As Mr. Haskins said, he was the vice president. The fair was a success, and they scheduled other fairs after that. And I will let Dr. Andrew Manville, our next honoree, to explain how the fair continued as he shares his story with us. Dr. Manville? I apologize for massacring your words.
Thank you, and well, good afternoon. I am Dr. Andrew J. Manville, and I would be very pleased to tell you a little bit about myself and, of course, about our great Wood County Fair. Unfortunately, though, I have an appointment this afternoon with C.R. Hopkins, who manages the Custer Grain Elevator over in Custer, so I am not going to be able to meet with you at this time. You see, I have these farms in Custer, and it is an imperative that I keep this appointment with Mr. Hopkins. So I am sorry, but I am going to have to go. Actually, wait a minute. Would you like to come with me on this trip? Yeah, good. I'm going to take the train from Bowling Green to Tautogany and then catch the CH&D line down to Custer. It is a beautiful day. It will be a pleasant journey. So how about it? Do you want to come along? Great. Good. Well, now we are all aboard and heading for Tautogany. We can have a nice visit with one another now. It certainly was convenient when the Bowling Green and Toledo Railroad Company put this connector line into Tautogany in 1875, and it was even better in 1890 when they extended it south to North Baltimore. I understand they have had some problems with that line from Bowling Green to North Baltimore, however. It seems they used slippery elm wood for the ties, and that hasn't worked out so well. Thankfully, I am sure this is the last time there'll be transportation issues between Bowling Green and North Baltimore. Never any more construction there. But enough train talk. Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am a Wood County boy. I was born right here in 1834 on the prairie just northwest of Bowling Green in what was to become Plain Township. In fact, that area is now part of our fair city. I was told that I am the second white child born in Plain Township. My father was Dr. Eli Manville, and my mother was Elizabeth. They actually moved to this area just before I was born. I have followed in my father's footsteps professionally, though I got my start as a farmer. When I was 14 years old, my mother gave me 40 acres of land. I cleared that land and built a log cabin, and I continued to farm there until 1863, when, also upon the advice of my mother, I committed to the study of medicine with Dr. G.J. Rogers, a pioneer physician here in Bowling Green. Like many physicians of his time, Dr. Rogers was also a pharmacist, so I learned how to compound medicine in the process. Then in 1864, I entered the medical college at Ann Arbor, and in 1865, I continued my education at the Bellevue Hospital Medical College in New York City. Upon graduation in 1866, I returned to Bowling Green and continued in partnership with Dr. Rogers. I built a beautiful brick house at 416 West Worcester, which was my home, my office, and my operating room. In addition to serving as a physician, I was also a bit of an entrepreneur. I created a number of housing developments, and I owned a number of farms around the county. In fact, I believe there is a street named after me on the east side of town. I was also instrumental in getting the Wood County seat relocated to Bowling Green from that town up north. I was a Presbyterian, a loyal Democrat, and an Order of the Masonic Order. On January 17th, 1872, I married Miss Alice Scholes, and we had several children together. Unfortunately, only one, Iona, lived to adulthood. But she married Alfred Haswell. In the early 1900s, he purchased the Wood County Sentinel, which later merged with the Tribune to make the Sentinel Tribune. And I understand that the Haswell family continued to own that newspaper for many, many years thereafter. Hey, I see that we are just coming into Tautogany. Let's transfer to that CH&D line and continue our trip to Custer. That'll be a much faster train, and we'll be in Custer in no time. Good. Now that we are settled in for our quick trip to Custer, let's talk about the fair a little bit. The first Wood County Fair was held in 1851 in Bowling Green, but after that, it moved all around the county. Eventually, it ended up in a permanent location in Tautogany. However, not having the fair here in Bowling Green did not sit well with some of our businessmen. Why should Tautogany have the fair and not Bowling Green? After all, we are the county seat and the largest city in the county. So, in 1881, I, along with a number of Bowling Green businessmen, created the Wood County Fair Association. I was elected its first president. We then purchased a lovely wooded area on the west half of the northeast quarter of Section 24 from Charles and R.W. Gorel for $1,500 and $2,500 to be paid in 2 years. I understand that this area is now the Bowling Green City Park, but in my time, it was our beautiful fairgrounds. We built a racetrack, a grandstand, many livestock barns, and a number of other buildings, including a beautiful building for display of flowers and needlework. I understand that even though the fair is no longer held there, the building still stands as the park as Needle Hall. Believe it or not, from 1882 to 1890, Wood County actually had 2 county fairs, ours in Bowling Green and the other in Tontogany. However, by 1890, it was felt Wood County could no longer support 2 fairs, so the fair at Tontogany joined us here as one Wood County fair. Bowling Green, finally, was the exclusive and permanent location of the Wood County Fair. Well, as I said, this was going to be a fast trip, and we are almost at my destination in Custer. These CH&D trains really do move things right along. I guess I need to say farewell since we are pulling into the station. I see Mr. Hopkins over there on the other side of the tracks. Goodbye. It has been nice visiting with you. What's that? Yes, of course I will be careful crossing these tracks. And yes, I do see that there is a train coming this way from the south, but it's probably one of those slow freights. The flyer should have been through here 45 minutes ago, so I can easily make it across the tracks before then. Thank you.
Sadly, Dr. Manville was killed in a train accident in Custer. For our purposes, the last thing he did was to share his story with us. Thank you, Dr. Manville. So, between 1851 and 1881, the Wood County Fair was located in several places. It was held in Perrysburg in 1852 and 1860. It went to Portage for a couple of years, but those years were plagued with cholera and other illnesses, and the fair returned to Bowling Green for a few years after that. As Dr. Manville told us, the first permanent home was in Tontogany, and he told you all about the conflict between Tontogany and Bowling Green and the 2 fairs going on at the same time, and they finally came to their senses, and so the fair ended up at what we now know as City Park from 1890 until 1927. Our next honoree, James Ordway, was very active in the Wood County Fair. Mr. Ordway?
Speak into it?
Yes.
Oh, well, hello, I'm James Ordway. Thank you, young man, for your introduction. If you'll forgive me, I've prepared some remarks. This is about how many people lived in Bowling Green when I lived there. In 1854, when I was around 12 years old, my father moved our family from Vermont to Householders Corners. Householders Corners. You may know it as Scotch Ridge. We lived there for 5 years, and then we moved to Bowling Green, and I've been here ever since. In July of 1862, as many young men did, I enlisted in the Ohio 100th Volunteer Infantry and served under Colonel John Shannon. 3 months after that, we participated in the fateful Battle of Perryville, Kentucky. From there, we marched on to Knoxville through a severe snowstorm. And as a result, I developed asthma, and it's been with me on and off ever since that time. I was discharged in July 1865, And when I returned home, I followed my father and took up carpentry. I became well known as a builder. My brother Thomas and I built most of the houses in the fast-growing community of Bowling Green, and most of the business blocks were also our handiwork. And, well, this building right here was the handiwork of my father, Amherst Ordway. Our work included the remodeling and upgrading of the Chittister Theater, as well as Mr. Chittister's home on West Worcester. I built a grain elevator in Dunbridge and the First National Bank in Dunkirk, Indiana. We turned the Black Home into a YMCA, and we built the Ohio Cut Glass Company on the ground where the Canastota glass factory had burned down. Lots of other buildings. Perhaps our most famous or infamous accomplishment, depending on how you feel about it, was the construction of the structure used for the execution of Karl Bach, Bowling Green's most infamous murderer. Now, one would think that someone who's done a fair amount of construction work over the years would know how to take care of himself, but sadly, in my case, that was not true. Just like everybody else, I've had my work accidents. One Tuesday afternoon, I was working in the English Brothers Grocery on South Main Street, and had a helper. Don't remember who that was. Anyway, I was on the top of the ladder in the 18-foot ceiling, working on a skylight. I'm holding the 2x4 up while my helper nailed it in, and the ladder wasn't there anymore. And so I naturally grabbed the only thing there was to grab onto, which unfortunately was a gas pipe going across the ceiling. That was a poor choice. And as I windmilled my way to the ground, I landed flat on my back on the floor, and I just laid there a good while until Dr. Halleck got here, gave me a quick look over, and pronounced me fit enough to be transported home, which I was on the young ambulance. Took me several weeks to recover from that fall, and I'm still not really quite ready to laugh about it. Now, of course, none of you care about any of that. You come to hear about the fair, and I was involved with the fair for some years. My brother and Tom and I built most of the buildings out on the current Wood County Fairgrounds. And I served for years as a director. I am amongst one of the oldest members of the fair board. During the 1920 fair, when I was 78 years old, I know I look pretty good, I was presented with a beautiful silver loving cup in recognition of my long service on the board, and I had been the director at that point for 32 years. Over the years, I've been in charge of many different things at the fair, from mechanicals all the way over to poultry. I have a great love for horses and horse races every year. Well, in 1904, I was elected director of the Bowling Green Trotting Association, and then participated in the Northwestern Ohio Trotting Association, planning the up next meet on July 4th. One of my favorite memories of the fair happened in 1889 when my brother, Tom, displayed a crayon drawing of our father, Amherst Ordway, in the art hall. One reporter for the Wood County Sentinel and Gazette stated that it was the most natural and lifelike picture he had ever seen. And Dad's many friends were pleased to see his picture amid the rushing and bustling scenes of the town that he had helped to make. Now, besides the fair, I have to admit I have one other passion, and that's fishing. I periodically go with several of my friends to Michigan for a week or two of fishing. Lake Manistee is my favorite place. Of course, the lower rapids on the Maumee River aren't too shabby either. They abound with pickerel. Sometimes they were so plentiful in that river that our arms ached from hauling them in. I remember one day in April, '04 I think it was, in 2 hours' time, we pulled in 49 pickerel. That was a good day. I belonged to the Bowling Green Fishing Club, and we maintained a cabin on Buttonwood Island in the river, and we could go spend a day or two fishing there anytime we wanted. It may be a little late in the season, but I do wish you all a good day. I'm going to go gather up my fishing equipment and head over there for a little relaxation with my fishing pole, and I thank you for listening to my story.
Thank you, Mr. Ordway. Now, in 1929, before the fair could open, a horse barn burned to the ground. The farmers were already struggling because the Depression hit them years before they hit the rest of us in 1929. The combination of these two things and other factors ended the Wood County Fair after 1927, and there was no fair for 23 years after that. Now, there were occasional activities that were fair-related that happened, and the 4-H club was going strong for the children at that time. But it was not until 1951 that we actually started the Wood County Fair up once again. Our next honoree, John Lawrence Clarke, was instrumental in getting the Wood County Fair up and running again. So, Mr. Clarke?
What a gorgeous day today would be to be at the fair. Every year, if it was like this, it'd be out of the park. Now, I'm talking about the Wood County Fair, the fair that I helped start in 1951. Of course, there were various fall festivals and other activities for other years before, but in 1951 is the year that we restarted officially the Wood County Fair. I remember previous fairs, which were held at the city park. Beautiful location, beautiful buildings. I remember when the horse barn burnt, gorgeous building, burnt to the ground. But adversity was something we were starting to get used to and figure out ways to get through it. Looking back, we made it through the Depression, we made it through World War II. We certainly were going to make it through to restart the fair. I was part of the committee that finally brought the Wood County Fair back to Wood County. I was the original secretary of the new fair board and held that position until 1967, when Dean Roach was hired to be the new secretary manager of the fair. I did, however, remain on the fair board until the end of the 1976 fair. My name is John Lawrence Clarke. Born in 1905 in Bellevue, Ohio. Received my bachelor's degree from Ohio Wesleyan College and my master's degree from The Ohio State University. I started my career as a teacher and a coach at the high school in Monroeville, Ohio. I then moved on to be a principal at Port Clinton. I was hired by the Bowling Green City Schools to supervise the student teaching program, and then I also taught biology and earth science in both the high school and junior high. After 35 years there, I finally retired. And as I look through the crowd today, I'm sure there's some familiar faces that traveled through my classrooms as students, and probably some children of the students that traveled through my classrooms. In 1930, I was lucky to marry Dorothy Koval. We celebrated 50 years together in 1980. We were also blessed with 3 children, John, Betty, and Richard. Dorothy was a graduate of Oberlin College and she taught in both Bellevue and Norwalk. She was a member of the Toledo Artists Club and Northwest Ohio Watercolor Society. She's a member of the Toledo Artists Club, the Northwest Watercolor Society, and her work has been exhibited all over northwestern Ohio as a very accomplished artist. Fortunately, she passed her artistic skills on to our daughter Betty. Betty, a very accomplished artist in her own right, and also a writer. One of Betty's published books was The Butterfly Girl, and I suggest that that's a great read for everyone. I must have instilled a little bit of my teaching passion into our son Jack. Jack received a PhD in English and became an English professor and poet at the State University of New York in Buffalo. He's published several books of poetry over the years. Richard went on to be the businessman in our family. He started Dino's in Main Street, which was an extremely popular eatery in Bowling Green. He went on to franchise a location called Village Pizza. All of our children were very successful, and Dorothy and I were extremely proud of all of their accomplishments in life. 1951 was a very busy year for me. Not only was I very busy trying to get the Wood County Fair restarted and opened, I was the public relations chairman for the newly established Wood County Hospital, which opened in August of 1951. That kept me quite busy with many activities, time-consuming, organizing fundraising functions, of course, for equipment, giving open house tours, and many other activities associated with what was needed to be done to get the Wood County Hospital going as well. As a member of the community, I was also willing to serve the community in various organizations in whatever I could do. During the Second World War, I was the Wood County chairman of the Savings Bond Program, and I was also busy being a Boy Scout troop leader. I'm a member of the Bowling Green Kiwanis and the Ohio Retired Teachers Association. Dorothy and I are members of the Trinity United Methodist Church. And in my semi-retirement, I also sell real estate. Our three children blessed us with many grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and that's probably the funnest thing of getting older, is spending time in spoiling grandchildren and some great-grandchildren. Dorothy, unfortunately, she passed away in 1986, and my son Jack passed in 1992. Having lived a wonderful life with a wonderful family in a wonderful community, there's not much more you could ask for living in Wood County and enjoying our life. I could share many more stories of my life, but I think it's time that I wrap this up. Thank you very much for allowing me to share my stories, and I'll turn this over to some other folks here that can share their stories of life in Wood County.
Thank you. So, the Wood County Fair was reopened in 1951 after a long dry spell. I suspect it is not a coincidence that the opening coincided with the 100th anniversary of the first county fair, the one on Church Street. Now, the first year of the new county fair was held actually at City Park. But the following year, the committee purchased some property on the corner of Poe and Haskins Road, where the parking lot is now. And the next year, the fair was at City Park and in this lot of land. Then they purchased some land on the other side of Poe Road, and the next year they straddled Poe Road with the county fair. And finally, in 1954, the entire fair moved up north of Poe Road, which is where it's been ever since. Now, there have been changes along the way. New buildings replaced older ones. New activities were added over the years. Perhaps the latest one was hosting the Bowling Green Community Band concert and sending off the fireworks for Independence Day. The fair continues to thrive and is likely to continue well into the future. Perhaps some of the children here in the audience will be around to celebrate the 200th Wood County Fair. Our remaining honorees all made their contributions to the fair in its current location on Poe Road. Our next honoree should have been Ethel Berlin, but I'm afraid she's unable to be here today. She told me yesterday that she's home with a nasty case of strep throat and she's feeling miserable. So we hope to reschedule her appearance soon for another Living History program because her story needs to be shared. I will give you some highlights about her reason for being part of this particular program. She and her husband Carl were artists and art teachers. Some of you may have been students at the Berlin Arts Center. Anybody here? Well, you probably know somebody. And she served on the board of the Wood County Fair for 20 years. When she started, there were about a dozen pictures, not matted or mounted, flapping in the wind of a tent. When she left after 20 years, there were over 600 artists exhibiting at the fair. We hope to share her whole story sometime soon, but for now, we're going to hear from a descendant of Collister Haskins, his several greats-grandson. I didn't actually count the families between. Fred Haskins. Fred?
Well, earlier, you heard from my great-great-great-grandfather, Collister Haskins, and he told you about his life and the settling of Portage. Now it's my turn. My life might not have been as exciting, and I didn't have to work quite as hard as he did, but I'd say I've also had a pretty interesting life here in Wood County. I was born in 1920 in Plain Township, where I've lived all my life. I grew up on a farm, and I went to Bowling Green High School, graduating in 1938 with an agriculture course major. You could say I came from a family of farmers. My dad, Waldo Haskins, had the distinction of being a member of the Ohio Ton Litter Swine Club. Now, you might be wondering, what do you have to do to become a member of the Ohio Ton Litter Swine Club? Well, first you have to make an application to join before the litter is farrowed. The litter must weigh 2,000 pounds or more, regardless of how many piglets are in it, 180 days after their birth. That's all there is to it. Dad had 11 pigs weighing a total of 2,390 pounds when he sent them to market. His was the first ton litter from Wood County officially recorded at The Ohio State University. In 1941, I married Dorothy Cass, a Wood County native, and we had 3 sons, James, David, and Michael. Michael took after Dorothy, who was extremely talented and excelled at whatever artistic pursuit she undertook. Michael died in 1991, but he was known for his interior designs, such as the one he did at the Hayes Adams Hotel in Washington, among other places. Now, David, he was known as Farmer Dave, since he spent many hours in the fields with me, and later on his own. James had other interests besides farming, and he pursued those instead. Now, in addition to farming, I also worked as an auto salesman, and I occasionally worked for the Soil Conservation Society. As a resident of Plain Township, I ran for and was elected to position as a Plain Township trustee. I held that position for 31 years. Saw a lot of changes during that time. Some of them good, and others not so much. Farming can be stressful, with concerns about whether the crops had been planted at the right time or if the rain was going to show up when we needed it. But one thing I love about farming is working with horses. I've been told I have an eye for a good horse. It doesn't matter if it's a draft horse, a pony, or a quarter horse. If it's healthy and pretty, I like it. In 1954, Marion Heiser, Howard Reinhardt, and I formed the Northwestern Ohio Pony Association, a nonprofit corporation to promote interest and enthusiasm for ponies, and to teach good sportsmanship. I passed along my love of horses to my grandson, Josh, and I was an American Horse Show judge for 20 years. Which brings me to the county fair. I will admit, and Dorothy will agree, that I put hours and hours and hours of love and work into my involvement with the Wood County Fair. I co-wrote the first 4-H horse and pony book that was used in Wood County, and I was the district director of the Ohio Farm Managers and was an office holder on the Ohio State Fair Board Association. I served Wood County Fair for some 37 years in one form or another. In 1990, I received a state award for having served on the Fair Board for 36 years. I have learned a lot about the history of the fair, and I've never been afraid to pass on my knowledge and wisdom at times when the members of the Fair Board got bogged down and needed some help getting back on track. In my spare time, I was a member and at one point master of the Tontogany Masonic Lodge and member of the Order of the Eastern Star Crystal Chapter of Bowling Green. Dorothy and I were members of the Cavalry United Methodist Church. I try to be upbeat and usually have a joke or two to pass along. I remember my friend Pat Frost, who was also a township trustee and served as fair board manager. She commented that I'm easygoing and a good friend. In fact, she told me over the years her boys had dogs, cats, pigs, and at least one out of every bunch they named Fred after me. Well, Great-Grandpa, I may not have lived in the same time as you, but you and I like a lot of the same things. Horses, farming, fairs. And while you settled first in Liberty Township and founded Portage, I've done my best for Plain Township and worked towards the advancement of the Wood County Fair.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from one of, I've already done that one. One of the people who worked with the 4-H with Fred Haskins was Julianna Hott. We'll hear from her next.
Maybe, yeah, you can catch my voice, yes. I'd like to start with something that Fred mentioned. Since we are celebrating the Wood County Fair, how many of you out there have been a part of 4-H? Quite a few, so I probably don't have to tell you what the 4-H's stand for, but I will for those who haven't been a part of 4-H. Head for clear thinking, heart for loyalty, hands for service, and health for better living. 4-H has been important to me for most of my life, and its connection with the fair has been there since before I was born. My name is Julianna Hott. I was born Julianna Lowmaster on September 6, 1922, right here in Bowling Green. My parents, Clifford and Pearl Lowmaster, moved here from Milton Center before I was born. I grew up here and went to Bowling Green High School and then attended college in Cincinnati, where I studied bookkeeping and other business-related subjects. That's where I met my husband, Paul. We were married October 16, 1942, and had 2 children, Kathy and Ed. who were born 18 months apart in 1944 and 1945. Paul was a glass worker at Libby Owens Ford in Toledo. Now, when I was a child, there was no Wood County Fair. The last fair at City Park was in 1927, as you've already heard, and I was barely 5 years old, and I don't remember much about it at all. And when the fair opened in 1941 again, I was married with 2 young children. It was a long stretch of time between fairs, but a lot of fair activities continued in the meantime. There were harvest festivals. Farmers would get together and show their horses and cattle. And of course, 4-H was going strong. All these things came back together when the fair reopened. During the 1930s, I was a member of the Friendly Workers 4-H Club. We learned sewing and knitting, crocheting, and embroidery. I served as a junior advisor of the Silver Stars 4-H Club when I was 15, another sewing club. I learned a lot about sewing from 4-H, and I have used what I have learned ever since. As an adult, I was a main advisor of the BG Spoon and Sew for 15 years, from 1950 to 1964. I was also a co-advisor with Fred of the Keystone 4-H Horses and Pony Club from 1961 to 1964. For most of my life, my home was one of the oldest houses in Bowling Green. It's on Napoleon Road, on the edge of town. And because the earlier owners were farmers, the house includes a huge amount of property. It was built in 1854, and its original owner was Pete Peachin. My parents bought the house when I was very young. I loved living in that old house. And in 1950, I became its owner and moved my family there when my kids were young. It's been in the family ever since. Now, we didn't do much farming of the land, but we did keep animals, mostly horses, chickens, and rabbits. My children showed their 4-H club, theirs at the 4-H club and at the fair. And a local magician would come and borrow one of our little bunnies for his magic show until it was too big to fit in his hat, and then he'd bring it back and take another little bunny. I had a pony that I took care of for years, well into my 80s. His name was Blaze, and he was part of the family. One of my favorite rooms in the house was our music room. There was always a piano in that room. I think it came with the house when my parents bought it. I took piano lessons, and I loved sitting in that room and playing the piano, especially show tunes and Lawrence Welk shows. When my children were growing up, sometimes we would play music together. Ed on the clarinet, Kathy on the accordion, and I played the piano. The stairway to upstairs was also in that room, and I arranged for a new railing for the stairs that included an iron treble clef and a number of plant holders. Lots of great memories in that room. Music was a passion of mine, and 4-H was a major part of my life. But I made my living as a florist. I worked at Klotz's just down the street from my house for several years, learning the ins and outs of the business. Then I went to work in a florist shop on Worcester Street. And in 1969, I bought that shop, and I called it the Flower House. I ran that business for 40 years. I retired in 2008 when I was 85 years old. As the owner of the Flower House, I provided the flowers and made the costumes for the king and queen of the county fair each year. I loved working at the Flower House. I love flowers. I had an enormous garden on the east side of the house. I grew a lot of flowers there, including large amounts of baby's breath, which I used for birthday and wedding bouquets at the Flower House. We also grew vegetables. My kids would harvest them, and I would can them. And I grew a variety of cucumbers that we would send to a local pickle factory. I enjoyed learning new ways to arrange flowers, and I provided flowers for many weddings and funerals and other events through the years. I also provided flowers for the ice skating programs at the ice arena, and I made the costumes for the skaters as well. Paul helped a lot at the flower house, making deliveries and providing assistance when it was needed. Ed and his wife Pam helped with deliveries too after Paul died in 1981. I often traveled to Europe to learn how countries and cultures there arrange their flowers. And I brought what I learned back to the flower house so that people in Bowling Green could also enjoy what other cultures were doing. Throughout my life, my family has been very important to me. Paul and I had almost 40 years together before he died. We watched Kathy and Ed become adults, and between them, they gave us 5 grandchildren. We also enjoyed family gatherings. In the years since Paul died, I watched my grandchildren grow up, and I have 7 great-grandchildren. My life outside the family has been dominated by 4-H and flowers. My life with my family has the gardens, music, and this great house and property to live in. I wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you for inviting me to share my life with you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hott. Our final portrayer for today's program is Daryl Hengus. Daryl?
Hello. Prior to 2013, this microphone would not have been useful, but I guess today it's probably important for us to use it today. Well, this certainly has been an enjoyable time listening to all these folks talk about their lives and the history of the wonderful Wood County Fair. But you know, after listening to each of them, I've come to the realization that I'm much younger than everybody here up on stage. Heck, I only came to the Fair Board in 1996. Some of these folks we've heard from today go back to the first fair in 1851. What a history our fair has. I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Daryl Hengus, and even though I'm a newbie on the Fair Board, I have been a part of the Wood County Fair since the modern fair, as I call it, started with the Wood County Harvest Festival in 1949. Boy, I remember those early fairs. Of course, back then, we didn't have a fairgrounds so much as we used City Park, which, as you heard, had been the fairgrounds until the fair ended in 1927. But the best part for me was that at 14 years old, I finally got to show my sheep at the Wood County Fair. And showing sheep at the fair has been a part of my life ever since. In fact, I hold the record for showing sheep at 63 consecutive Wood County fairs. I don't think anybody's topped that yet. But I will have to say that was not an easy task, especially in the late 1950s when I served in the Army. I somehow was able to convince the Army that I needed to have my furlough during the Wood County Fair, and by golly, they allowed me to do it each year. I remember one year, I got home the night before the fair started. Boy, did I have to hustle to get my sheep ready to show that year. Another memory I have of one of the early fairs was the Catch a Calf contest. It was a lot like the Catch a Pig contest we have today, but we had to catch and wrestle a young calf to the ground. If that wasn't bad enough, the area that we had to do it in had been covered in large weeds, which had only recently been cut a few inches above the ground. So not only did we have to deal with the calf, we had to deal with those stiff weed stems, which some of which were half an inch in diameter or larger. That hurt, not only from tackling the calf, but from those darn weeds. Later in life, I graduated to the high position of head greaser for the Greased Pig contest, a job my niece remembers fondly. When the fair finally got a permanent location on Poe Road, we only had tents for our livestock. Then the fair board built some permanent barns for steers and hogs. Again, not sheep, steers and hogs. But for some reason, the sheep weren't good enough, and we only had a tent. Then, in the late 1960s, my father-in-law, Lawrence Brinker, and I, and a few others, went to the fair board to build a pole barn for the sheep. Boy, did those old fair board members laugh. A pole barn. Those things will never last. You need a regular barn, like the 4 we have for the beef and swine, and we can't afford that. Well, we built a pole barn, painted it blue, and if you go to the fairgrounds today, you'll see that those 4 barns that the fair board built for the beef and swine are no longer there. But our flimsy pole barn, as they called it, still stands proud and will for many years. By the way, I understand that those 4 barns that the fair board thought were so good have now been replaced by the new Pratt Pavilion. I've been told that new pavilion is just slicker than snot on your sleeve. I really haven't talked much about my family and their involvement in showing sheep at the fair. For us, showing sheep is truly a family affair. My dad was O.C. Henches, and he showed Rambouillets and Corriedales. My sister, Von Davidson, and her family, including my handsome and humble great-nephew, have all shown sheep as well as my children, Dawn Anderson, Deanne Corkin, along with my grandchildren, Lisa and Andy, and probably my great-grandchildren, Zoe and Avery. My wife, Ruth Ann, also comes from a sheep family. Her dad, Lawrence Brinker, and all of Ruth Ann's siblings have been extensively involved with 4-H and the fair, many showing sheep. Lawrence was also on the fair board for many years. Our family stayed at the fair every year. We wore out 3 campers, and if you do the math, I've slept over a year at the fairgrounds. Now, I don't mean to brag, but our family has had our share of honors at the fair. I was champion sheep showman in 1951 and 1952. Plus, I've won my share of 4-H and open class sheep classes. Several years ago, the sheep department established the O.C. Henches and Son Memorial Award. I'm the son, which is awarded annually to the fair that exhibits sheep with the best fleece of wool at the fair. I'm proud to say that I even won it a few times. Another fact that I'm really proud of was when my granddaughter, Lisa Corkin, now Karis, was crowned Junior Fair Queen in 2008. But I believe the biggest honor occurred recently when the Wood County Fair Board established the Darrell Henches the Darrell Henches Sportsmanship Award. This award is given to a deserving participant in each of the 8 livestock classes who show good sportsmanship and respect for others during Fair Week. I've always emphasized to my kids, as well as members of my 4-H clubs, that good sportsmanship was far more important than winning a blue ribbon or a trophy. In my non-fair life, some of you may remember me working with Ed Miller as salesman for Massey Ferguson on North Dixie, or for many years, you probably saw me serving as clerk for Keith Bradley's auctions. That was one of my favorite jobs because I got to meet so many people and brag about my family, whether they asked or not. I was also 4-H advisor for many years and served as poet laureate for the Bowling Green Rotary Club, a position which may surprise many of you. Yes, the Wood County Fair was a huge part of my family's life, and I'm pleased to say that even though I'm no longer around, my daughter, Deanne Corkin, has now very capably taken my place on the Wood County Fair Board. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you today about my family and the Wood County Fair, which is how I spend 99% of my time otherwise. Thank you.
So we come full circle with the sheep. The first county fair back in 1807 was all about sheep and sheep shearing, and now we come back to an entire family dedicated to showing their sheep at the Wood County Fair. I'd like to thank you all for coming. This was a delight. The weather has cooperated wonderfully for today, and so I want to thank you all for coming. Before I say goodbye, I would like everybody who is a descendant from one of these people to please stand one more time, and so we can applaud you. Everybody, please stand. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, family, for coming to hear your ancestor being honored today. And I hope we got it reasonably correctly, and I'm sure that if we didn't, you'll come and correct us. That's also part of the pattern here at the Living History Museum. So thanks again for coming. You're welcome to go inside to the gift shop and other things that are going on in there. I don't know, that's your job.
I'll come up and tell her.
Okay, she'll come up and tell you. I'll just say thank you, and we'll look for you next year.
Thank you again for coming to our 20th Living History Day. As many of you have probably read in multiple news outlets and papers and seen on TV, we lost 11 radiators at Christmas with those negative temperatures. And just this week, Kirian's is putting the flooring into the exhibits where the water damaged everything. So that means we don't have any exhibits for you to see today. After they finish the flooring next week, we will be building the exhibits on top of that new floor. And our soft opening will be Monday, October 16th. And our ribbon cutting and reopening of the exhibits will be Thursday, October 19th. We will have the For Comfort and Convenience, a history of all of Ohio's infirmaries. That's Exhibit 1. Exhibit 2 is Allure and Illusion, weddings in Wood County, and features over 40 wedding dresses from the 1850s up to present day. And then the final exhibit is the Mary and Carl Bach story. So those three will be reopened, and it will have that new museum smell, I promise, when we get it open in October. So thank you all for supporting us today. And if you still want to see what the inside hallway looks like, you're welcome to it. Also, the restrooms are still open, and so is the gift shop. And thank you again. Have a lovely day.